Hey, it's Chris and Brian here from Resolve Technology. And today, Chris wants to do a ticket talk and talk about a recent ticket that came in, which kind of turned into like a little mini project, actually. Not so much something you can fix straight away, but he fixed it within a day or two using renewing a cert and getting a new cert. So, just a reminder that most of these certs, they need to be renewed on a regular basis. And in this example, we basically got a ticket in because the client processes credit cards and their bank or payment processor did a scan on the network and found that the certificate is attached to the public IP to the firewall. It didn't pass because the certificate expired. So you got to keep those certificates up to date. And I'll let Chris shed a little bit of light on this for us.
Yeah, so this is PCI compliant. You need to have a PCI compliant VPN. There's a few things we did here. Originally, we used something called the FortiGate firewall. We use a traditional SSL VPN for them. They remote into their computers in the office. If you weren't doing card processing, most people, you just have a static IP there. And you pick a port and you configure the client and they can connect in. You might get a warning that it might not be secure. But with this, what we tried doing is generating our own, like a self-signed certificate using something like OpenSSL.
Or Let's Encrypt.
Yeah, exactly. And it failed. So they didn't accept that. They wanted some certificate you'd purchase from something like a DNS registrar or any certificate authority, really. And then once we got that, I was able to go through the process of getting a CSR, a certificate signing request, verifying that I own the domain I say I am, because it's a subdomain, what we use, vpn.thecompany.com, pointing on this port, pointing to the static IP of the office.
Right. And just to give some people an idea, if they go to try to do this on themselves or there are IT people out there unsure of where to find this stuff, I mean, you get these certificates from GoDaddy sells them, Network Solutions sells them, all these web host providers.
So I didn't get I didn't know this was what was going on. She just mentioned, hey, we have an issue, right? I failed the test. Didn't give me much details, but I had an inkling of, I thought it might be something related to that. All I did is I came into this is my firewall. This is like a lab firewall. I went into certificates here and you'll see I have some of my own that are self-signed here. This is something you can see it's valid. Their certificate we set up to make them compliant was no longer valid. So I had to go generate a new certificate. Some people may say, why don't you just, like with the domain, why renew it every year? Why not just get it for 5 years? At least with Namecheap, in my experience, even if you get it, right, for 5 years, you purchase that certificate for a domain, you still got to go in there annually and do the whole process. At least in my experience, that's what we've had to do with clients that have certificates that are anywhere from 3 to 5 years in duration. Now, this here is how to set up a PCI DSS compliant VPN. They just, it's an article. I'll have Brian link it, but it's a security system that conforms to the payment card industry data security standards, which is that acronym PCI DSS. And it's just security standards for data confidentiality, integrity, and availability for sensitive data like that. Now, the primary...
So one of the key, I just want to, before you get too far ahead, I want to say that it's important that for peace that you keep those credit card processing devices or machines that process the credit cards on a separate VLAN or a separate physical network than the rest of your internal devices. Otherwise, you may fail PCI or you'll at least fail the questionnaire part, which is a big component of PCI. They ask a lot of questions and you can solve a lot of problems by keeping this processing stuff that processes credit cards away from the rest of your devices on the network. That's very important.
And I mean, there's multiple ways you can go about safely doing that. But yeah, you don't want to, like Brian said, you don't want to just throw it on the network where all your company data is stored. But here, they're just mentioning the objective. So its aim is to protect the payment card industry and ensure transactions are secure using a VPN that is aligned with these objectives. Build and maintain secure network and systems, protect the cardholder data, implement strong access control measures. I'm just going over a few of them. I'm not going to go over all of them. And they have 3 types of networks that, according to this compliance: internal, which is isolated cardholder data environment; DMZ, internet facing endpoint; insecure public internet. Insecure public internet would be you're not doing it on the Starbucks public Wi-Fi or a hotel Wi-Fi you're at or something weird where you're set up. I don't know what environment would or who would actually end up doing that, but
Well, I had an example, like say you're processing from a computer that is outside the firewall. It's still on your network, but somehow you put it on the outside of your firewall and it didn't have any type of firewall to block. That would be like just throwing it onto the public internet, and that would be game over because you would be easily hacked into. So you don't want to
yeah.
do that. It needs to be behind the firewall, but it needs to be on a separate network somehow, whether that's a virtual separate network or a physical separate network. So we were able to, in this instance, get the client compliant as far as the processor goes because they just saw that the certificate expired. A lot of these scans that these processors are using are not really that in depth. Until you get into the internal and find the internal vulnerabilities, you're just scanning on the outside of the network, and things like certificate fail, expired certificates, things like that Chris is pointing out. That's what they're going to pick up on. So it's not the end of the world if you fail one of these tests. Usually there's an easy fix like this, like Chris is saying, is to renew the certificate. But yeah, if you really wanted, or if they really wanted to find out if someone was secure, they'd also do an internal scan of the network to make sure that we're, doing everything that we're supposed to be doing. Your IT people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, all right,
like
we'll wrap it
pen
there, Chris.
testing
Hey,
light.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, bye.
Bye.